everyone, and welcome to Neurotalk. We are an interdisciplinary assembly of students from Neurotech at Berkeley, UC Berkeley's premier neuroscience club. We're here to pick the brains of key leaders in thought and industry within the neuroscience and neurotechnology worlds to really take a deep dive into the gray matters between our brains and the technological world around us. I'm Emma, your host, and I have the great pleasure of being here with Iain McIntyre today, co-founder of Humm. So Iain, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me. For our users and watchers who don't know a ton about Humm and what you do, would you mind just walking us through what it is, how it works, and a little bit about how the company came to be?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me. That was a great introduction. It's always an honor to be involved in Neurotech at Berkeley because it's such a prestigious club. My name's Iain. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Humm. Humm is a company that is making neuroscience products that are going to enable people to get better out of their brains and live better lives over the next 20 and 30 years. We're part of an industry called neurotechnology, which is basically connecting computers and technology in general with the brain. Our technology that we're starting with, we have a really broad vision for the future, but the one that we're starting with is something called neurostimulation. It's basically interfacing with the brain by putting in really tiny electrical currents that tune what's going on in the brain. And after about 20 or 30 years worth of neuroscience lab work, doing exactly the stuff that we do with the Humm patch, which is our product, we know that we can change people's behavioral and mental and emotional and cognitive outcomes. The Humm patch that we are building, though, is an attempt to make that technology usable by people. Instead of being expensive, difficult to use, and pretty intimidating stuff that you might find in a neuroscience lab, it's a little patch that you put on your forehead. It just clips on like a Band-Aid, just a little bit sticky. Doesn't hurt or anything like that. It's really simple and easy to use, kind of like a pill. You basically get a half an hour to an hour and 30 minutes boost in your cognitive processing capabilities, something called your working memory, which allows you to do things like learn new things, focus easier. You wear it for about 15 minutes, you get that boost. And we found that over the course of months, you'll learn things faster and be able to remember them more reliably. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool stuff. So you mentioned that it clips right onto your forehead, somewhat like a pill. How do the effects of using this neurostimulation technique differ from traditional previous mechanisms for increasing engagement, especially, let's say, in the workplace through things like caffeine, or for people with ADHD through a drug like Adderall? What does kind of the behavioral differences look like between those two things?
Yeah, great question. So the really exciting thing about this technology is that it can have a direct, immediate, measurable effect. So a lot of the things that you just mentioned, caffeine, like focus strategies, things like meditation, and even stimulants and other neuroactive chemicals that you might take in prescription medications, oftentimes they're quite slow to act. They have side effects. They interact with the nervous system. They interact with the brain's chemistry and things like that. And a lot of the time, they're actually not directly measurable. You will not be able to measure an effect very quickly, if at all, because caffeine can have a positive or negative impact on your working memory, but meditation can be difficult and you can get it wrong. And some of those more prescription drugs can actually have other side effects too. So it's really cool that putting on a Humm patch, just like that, wearing it for a couple of minutes, you can actually do a study like the one that we did in our white paper and many papers that we referenced in that paper that had come before us, where you measure someone's working memory using cognitive games, basically, but they're very difficult, designed to be consistent in a scientific setting. And you can actually measure an improvement in people's memory capacity. So we can measure that they can remember more digits at any time and learn skills faster and adapt to new information and distractions faster. So it's different in that it's quick, it's measurable in that way, but also we believe quite a lot safer in the long run too, because a lot of those chemical stimulants and things like that, although many of them have been deemed safe and, with large amounts of people using them compared to neurostimulation, they do have effects on your brain, particularly if you use them a lot. And that can be addiction. It can be chemical and physiological rewiring of the way that your brain works that you may not actually appreciate. And what we're doing is a very, very tiny amount of electricity that's never been seen to have any of those effects chemically or physiologically. So it's pretty cool stuff in that way too.
Definitely. So without this rewiring, these greater physical effects that we see from using, like, let's say, caffeine, How does this neurostimulation actually interface with our brains? So what is kind of the mechanism of intervention that is what creates this really interesting effect?
Yeah. One thing I always like to start to say is that we are really, although we understand the brain so much better than we did 30 years ago, still really at the beginning of understanding how the brain works. And so there are definitely some things that we know that we can rely on, and some of them are to do with the safety of neurostimulation. But then the very fine mechanisms are still under investigation. What we can tell you is that your brain seems to be, or it seems to act like an electric circuit. It's made up of these billions of neurons and these tens of trillions of connections between them. You can think of them as little wires between bits of a circuit. When you step back and you use a multimeter or just a device to measure what's going on in that circuit, by putting little electrodes or sticky bits on the head, you can measure the electricity that's flowing in the brain and measure what's going on between those neurons. We see these things called brain waves, and those waves are made up of little electrical pulses going along those wires between neurons. And when we measure them when someone's asleep or awake or focusing or distracted, angry, sad, we see pretty different patterns. And we can measure them pretty consistently across people. And the more we get to know one person's brain, the more accurate we can be again. What Humm basically does, what our little patch does, and what this form of neurostimulation does in general, is we tune those waves. We do that by putting in a little artificial electrical current or electrical field, which causes the neurons to either fire or not fire, and just interacts with that electrical signal in the brain waves. Humm is doing that in a very specific way in a part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, just underneath your forehead, which is kind of the most evolved part of the brain, which separates us from monkeys and things. What we're doing there is we're boosting one signal and actually causing it to link up to different parts of the brain as well, that signal. And that enables, it's called the theta wave. It's about 6 hertz within that frequency spectrum. What that allows the brain to do, and behaviorally what we measure, is the information transfer process increases in speed and the quantity of information that you can store increases. So if someone says to you a bunch of numbers, you'll be able to remember more of those numbers. Someone tells you to add them together, you'll be better at it. And if someone else is shouting numbers at you from the distance, distracting you, you'll be better able to handle that too.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for giving us just this tiny, even glimpse into the incredible work that you and your company Hum is doing. And I'm personally really excited to see where this goes in the future. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was great. Have a great night.
You too.
Hey everyone, hey Luke. Thanks so much for watching this week's episode of Neurotalk. We really hope you enjoyed and learned something new. Today we chatted with Iain McIntyre, co-founder of Humm, about how we can harness neurotechnology to both increase our productivity and decrease our use of caffeine and other stimulants and focus enhancers. So Luke, after this chat, are you ready to ditch your morning brew for a Humm headband?
Yeah, I can't wait to save an extra 15 minutes in bed from skipping my caffeine fix. But honestly, I think this has a lot of bigger public health implications. Think about the prescription drug epidemic in professional settings and on college campuses. I think Humm's presenting an innovative and realistic solution to these problems.
Yeah, I think it's great, and it's pretty crazy to see how neurotechnology is moving even beyond research efforts and things like that, and really potentially in the next few years, as it becomes less taboo and more accessible, can have huge public health implications in a way we maybe wouldn't have even thought of a few years prior. That said, I really can't wait for our next episode where, Luke, you get to chat with the execs from BrainUp in partnership with Neurocollege at Stanford about their startup journey in the neurotechnology industry. So guys, if you liked this video, make sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe if you're interested in hearing what Luke gets to talk about with them, and also the exciting other things we have in store within neuroscience and neurotech.
Yeah, feel free to comment below what you want to hear from, who you want to hear from, and thanks for watching, y'all.
Thanks, guys. Take it easy.